The desert stretched endlessly beneath a sky choked with heat, wind, and the ever-present hum of spinning turbines. The mystery machine rumbled down the dirt road, coughing and sputtering, until a loud bang echoed from under the hood. Smoke hissed from the engine, forcing Fred to pull over. "Well, gang," he sighed, stepping out into the blinding sunlight, "looks like we're stuck." Shaggy peeked out from the passenger window, his voice trembling. "Man, couldn't this have happened near, like, a burger shack instead of a giant science project in the middle of nowhere?" Scooby whimpered in agreement, ears drooping as he sniffed the dry, dusty air. Towering above them, dozens of wind turbines rotated slowly, creaking in the hot breeze. They had unknowingly stopped at the edge of Ventogyro, a sprawling wind farm rumored to hold secrets that danced on the wind. While Fred opened the hood to inspect the damage, Velma was already scanning the area. "This place wasn't on any map I checked," she murmured, adjusting her glasses. "And I don't like how quiet it is, except for that constant humming." Just then, a cloud of sand swirled unnaturally around them, rising like a miniature tornado before dispersing into nothing. Daphne covered her face. "That wasn't just wind," she said, eyes narrowing. "That felt directed." They heard the roar of a motorcycle approaching. A woman in desert gear pulled up beside them, her bike kicking up a storm of grit. "You lost?" she asked, taking off her helmet to reveal sharp green eyes and weather-beaten skin. "This isn't a great place to break down." Fred nodded, brushing dust from his shirt. "Yeah, we didn't mean to stop here." "Car trouble." "Do you work here?" The woman hesitated. "Sort of. Name's Ray. I manage security for the park, when there's something left to secure." "You should leave before sundown." "Why?" Velma asked directly. Ray gave a half-smile. "Because this place isn't just full of wind. It's haunted by it." Later that afternoon, Ray reluctantly agreed to let them rest in the maintenance trailer near the edge of the turbine field. Inside, old control panels blinked and buzzed, and faded blueprints covered the walls. While Fred tried to fix the mystery machine, Velma explored the data logs on a dusty console. "These readings don't make sense," she muttered. "Power surges during calm weather. Turbines reversing direction. That's not how any of this is supposed to work." Shaggy and Scooby, meanwhile, had sniffed out a stack of crates marked organic food storage, property of Green Earth Energy Corporation, Zoinks. Shaggy exclaimed, opening a box of vacuum-sealed kale chips. "This place might be haunted, but at least it's deliciously haunted." As night fell, the wind picked up suddenly, howling in erratic bursts. The turbines spun faster, their blades groaning under the pressure. A loud klaxon blared from the trailer's wall panel. Fred looked up from his tool kit. "What's that alarm?" Ray burst in, visibly shaken. "There's a grid overload. We're losing control of the turbines." Outside, lights flickered across the horizon as sections of the wind farm blinked into darkness. Velma grabbed her laptop. "Something is interfering with the systems. It's like, they're responding to signals that aren't coming from here." A blinding flash exploded across the desert, and a sandstorm erupted instantly, whipping toward the trailer. Scooby dove under the table, tail between his legs. "Roo-row." Through the storm, a distant figure appeared atop a hill, tall, wrapped in cloth, arms outstretched like wings. It stood still despite the fury of the wind. Fred squinted. "Is that someone, controlling this?" No one answered. The sandstorm hit like a wave, rattling the trailer and slamming the door shut. Inside, the group huddled as electronics sparked and monitors crackled. Then, just as suddenly, silence. The storm stopped. The turbines slowed. And the power came back on by itself. Velma's voice broke the hush. "That wasn't natural. Something is manipulating this wind farm like a puppet on strings." Shaggy peeked out from under a box of lentil crackers. You mean there's, like, a wind ghost with a grudge? Velma shook her head. I don't believe in ghosts. But someone wants us to. Outside, the shadowy figure had vanished. Only the faint echo of the wind remained. Night fell hard over Ventogiro, casting long shadows from the towering turbines as they creaked and groaned like ancient sentinels. Inside the maintenance trailer, the gang tried to shake off the storm's eerie aftermath. Fred secured the door with a metal bar, while Shaggy and Scooby clung to their shared sleeping bag, still nibbling nervously on dehydrated banana chips. Like, can sand give you nightmares? Shaggy whispered, his eyes darting to the windows. Scooby nodded, mouth full. Rhea, scary sand. Daphne stood at the back of the trailer, staring at the leather-bound journal she had discovered buried in the sand earlier that evening. Its cover was scorched at the edges, and its pages were brittle with age. She opened it carefully. Inside, notes written in shaky, all-capital letters described unusual phenomena, sudden turbine surges, blackout zones, and whispers that seemed to follow the technicians around the wind field. One page was missing, ripped out violently. The remaining pages repeated one phrase. The spirit awakens when silence is broken. Velma sat beside her, scrolling through encrypted logs on her laptop. This journal matches some of the system logs I've found. A technician named Marco Trevi filed multiple incident reports before he vanished. No record of a resignation. No trace. Fred frowned. So the company just erased him? Or someone wanted it to look that way, Velma muttered. We're dealing with more than spooky folklore. A distant noise echoed through the open vents, a hollow, almost human moan that rose and fell with the wind. Everyone froze. Did you hear that? Daphne asked, clutching the journal. Fred grabbed his flashlight. I'm going out there. Like, say what now? Shaggy squeaked. Haven't you seen horror movies? Chapter 2 is always when the group splits up and, bam. Ghost attack. I'm not asking you to come, Fred said. I need to check the turbine relays. Ray mentioned an auxiliary tower that controls the outer grid. If someone's manipulating the wind, that's a good place to start. Scooby shoved a granola bar into Shaggy's hand. Real protect you. No offense, pal, Shaggy muttered, but the last time we tried to protect someone, we both ended up inside a compost bin. Reluctantly, the group agreed to split. Fred and Velma would investigate the auxiliary tower, while Daphne stayed behind with Shaggy and Scooby to study the journal further. As Fred and Velma disappeared into the night, the wind turbines loomed overhead, spinning faster than they had earlier. And higher up, in the shadows of the tallest blades, unseen shapes shifted. Inside the trailer, Daphne laid the journal across the table. This handwriting changed here, she noted. Marco's entries were neat, scientific. But after page 20, it's erratic. Desperate. Shaggy flipped through a few pages and stopped. Whoa. Look at this sketch. The drawing showed a control room buried underground, with strange antennae jutting out like insect legs. A handwritten note beside it read, "They buried the core, but it still speaks." Scooby whimpered. Rat does it mean? Daphne's brow furrowed. I think Marco discovered something beneath this wind farm. Something the company didn't want anyone to know about. Suddenly, the lights flickered again. The trailer filled with a high-pitched frequency, like a feedback loop from an old radio. Shaggy covered his ears. Make it stop. Then silence. A soft knock echoed from the metal door. Knock. Pause. Knock. Knock. Daphne approached cautiously and peeked through the side window. No one was there. The desert was empty. But the turbines had stopped spinning. She opened the door slightly, and a piece of paper fluttered in with the wind, landing at Scooby's paws. It was the torn page from Marco's journal. Scribbled across it in what looked like soot. Don't listen to the wind. It's learning from you. Meanwhile, at the auxiliary tower, Velma typed rapidly at a control panel while Fred illuminated the room with his flashlight. Dust coated the console, but it was still active. This system is wired to receive external commands, Velma said, surprised. But from where? Fred scanned the wall of monitors. What's that blinking? A monitor displayed a satellite feed of the park. One area, just north of the trailer, glowed red. Thermal spike, Velma said. Something under the sand is emitting energy. Before she could finish, the tower began to shake. Outside, the turbines moved again, backwards. Against the wind. Fred grabbed Velma's arm. Time to go. They raced back toward the trailer as another sandstorm loomed on the horizon. The morning sun was a dull glow behind a curtain of sand, painting the desert in hues of amber and dust. The gang regrouped outside the trailer, shielding their eyes from the relentless wind. Fred's boots crunched on something solid just beneath the surface, a metallic clink that didn't belong to the desert. He knelt and brushed aside the sand. A hatch. It's real, Velma whispered, crouching beside him. Just like Marco's drawing. An underground facility buried under this place. Shaggy backed away. Maybe we should undiscover it. Nothing good ever starts with a hidden door in the middle of a haunted wind farm. Yeah, Scooby agreed, gripping Shaggy's leg. Fred grabbed the rusted handle and heaved. The hatch resisted with a mechanical groan, but finally gave way. A ladder descended into the darkness below, lit only by a faint pulsing red light from deep within. A stale, electric scent rose up, like copper, dust, and old servers. Velma turned on her headlamp. I'm going down. Fred followed without hesitation. Daphne, despite a chill crawling down her spine, took a breath and stepped in next. Scooby and Shaggy looked at each other. Rast one down is a rotten tofu nugget, Scooby barked, and they scrambled after the others. They emerged in a narrow concrete corridor lined with peeling hazard signs and dangling wires. The walls were covered in chalk markings and faded diagrams, circuit boards, turbine schematics, and formulas scrawled in urgency. At the far end, an old vault door stood half open, creaking softly in rhythm with the wind above. Daphne touched the wall, eyes scanning the drawings. These symbols, they're like sound wave patterns. Why draw them over and over? Velma replied, I think Marco discovered the turbines were transmitting data, maybe even receiving it. But not from satellites. From something else. Inside the vault, they found a low-ceilinged room housing an array of obsolete computers, oscilloscopes, and a large cylindrical device in the center, a sound emitter, partially dismantled. Red indicator lights blinked like a dying heartbeat. On the far side, an old reel-to-reel recorder spun slowly, playing back a loop of distorted whispers. Shaggy leaned in. What's it saying? Velma adjusted the playback frequency. The static cleared briefly. Don't disturb the silence. Scooby whimpered. Ruro. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them. The lights blinked out, and the device in the center powered on. A deafening hum filled the room. The walls vibrated. Then, a surge of wind blasted from the ventilation shaft above, sending Shaggy flying into a pile of filing cabinets. Fred banged on the vault door. It's locked. Velma scanned the room with her flashlight and spotted a small interface console with a biometric scanner. It's rigged to Marco's print. Or someone matching his credentials. Daphne turned toward the wall, where a framed photo hung askew. Marco Trevi, young, confident, holding a wrench. Behind him stood Ray, the facility manager they had met earlier. Velma's eyes narrowed. Why would Ray be in a photo taken over a decade ago? Shaggy groaned from the floor. Maybe she's a vampire. Fred shook his head. Or maybe Ray's been here way longer than she let on. They managed to manually override the power surge by disconnecting a junction box beneath the emitter. The humming ceased, and the vault door creaked open. One by one, they emerged into the corridor, breathless but intact. Outside, the wind had stopped. Completely. The turbines stood frozen, their blades rigid. The sky was still, the sand suspended in eerie silence. Velma adjusted her glasses. Something in that device was influencing the wind patterns, and the machines. Daphne looked up at the motionless turbines. "Do you think someone is using sound to control them?" "Not just the turbines," Velma said. "Maybe even, people." They climbed out through the hatch, and Scooby quickly kicked sand over it. "Nope. Nope. Bury it again." Before they could debate their next move, a voice called out from across the field. "Looking for something?" It was Ray, standing near the service shed, arms crossed, her shadow long in the morning light. Behind her, the door to the shed was ajar. Inside, a bank of monitors glowed with live feeds of the wind farm, and the underground facility. Velma whispered, "She's been watching us the whole time." Ray smiled coldly. "Let's not pretend you weren't meant to find it." The team followed Ray silently into the dimly lit service shed. Banks of old monitors flickered with feeds from every corner of the wind farm, blades turning slowly in the dusk, long roads trailing into the dunes, and one unsettling image, a camera feed from the underground vault they had just escaped, now inexplicably powered back on. Ray gestured to the wall of screens. "You kids stumbled onto something way above your clearance." Fred folded his arms. "What exactly is this place, Ray? Why are you in a decade-old photo with Marco Trevi?" Ray didn't flinch. She sat on a battered stool and lit a cigarette, the tip glowing faintly under the dusty ceiling lamp. "Marco was my partner. We designed Ventogyro together. This wasn't just a wind farm, it was an experiment. One that went too far." Velma stepped closer. "An experiment in what?" "Sound," Ray replied. "More specifically, resonance. We theorized that the desert's mineral makeup could amplify subsonic frequencies. The turbines weren't just harvesting wind, they were transmitting harmonic pulses to the earth beneath." Daphne looked horrified. "You were trying to control the desert?" "No," Ray said quietly. "We were trying to communicate with it." Shaggy blinked. "Like, talk to sand?" Velma interjected, "She means seismic intelligence. Patterns in nature. Vibrational signatures in the crust. You thought something might be responding." Ray nodded slowly. "And it did." Scooby's ears perked up. His tail stiffened. "Rue, respond." Fred leaned forward. "Are you saying Marco made contact with something underground?" Ray's eyes darted to the monitors. One showed turbine number 19, spinning despite the motionless air. She stood, visibly shaken. "He didn't just make contact. He tried to harness it." Suddenly, static buzzed from the comms radio on the desk. It crackled violently, then a deep voice whispered through, grainy and distorted, yet unmistakably canine. "Scoo-by." The Great Dane froze. His fur bristled. "Rue." Velma snatched the radio and turned the dial, but the voice was gone. "Just wind." "That's impossible," she muttered. "No signal like that could carry without." Ray interrupted, "Without a living amplifier. Something, or someone, attuned to the waveforms." That's what Marco realized too late. Shaggy backed toward the door. "I don't know what's scarier, desert ghosts whispering Scooby's name or the idea that you built this monster." Fred turned to Ray. "Where is Marco now?" Ray looked down. "Gone. He vanished 5 years ago, after initiating the last resonance pulse. I tried to shut everything down, but by then, it was awake." Daphne stared at the monitor displaying the underground vault. "If it's awake, why hasn't it done more damage?" Velma walked to the edge of the room and stared out the open window toward the turbines. Because it's waiting. Studying us. Testing what it can control. A sudden, low hum shook the ground beneath their feet. The shed lights flickered. Outside, 3 turbines began to spin, not with the wind, but against it. Ray's eyes widened. That's not the system rebooting. It's sinking. Fred and Velma rushed to the control panel. Wires sparked and fuses blew, but Velma managed to tap into the manual override. Data scrolled rapidly across the screen, raw code, sound frequencies, and a strange repeating line. We see. We learn. We rise. Velma read it aloud, her voice dry. This isn't just Marco's experiment anymore. Something's evolving. Ray pulled open a steel cabinet and handed Fred an old blueprint. There's another facility. Off-grid. Buried in the north quadrant. That's where Marco activated the main beacon. It might be where he disappeared. The gang exchanged looks. Fred nodded. Then that's where we're going. Shaggy moaned. Can't we just, not go toward the beacon of doom for once? Scooby barked. Nope. As they prepared to leave, Velma grabbed a reel of backup data from the control room. Daphne loaded the map coordinates into the van's GPS. Ray stayed behind, saying she'd attempt to keep the turbines from sinking further, but her face betrayed a deeper fear. When the mystery machine rumbled toward the northern sector, dusk had fully settled. Shadows stretched long across the sand. The turbines loomed like sentinels, some spinning slowly, others motionless. But always, watching. Scooby sat up suddenly, ears twitching. The hum returned, faint but rhythmic. Then, a whisper only he could hear. Scooby, bring them. He howled in terror. Fred hit the brakes. What is it, Scoob? Velma grabbed her notepad. Did it say something again? Scooby's eyes were wide. It knows we're coming. The northern sector of the Ventogyro wind farm was silent. No turbines turned. No lights flickered. Only sand, endless waves of it, shifted under a crimson moon. The mystery machine rolled to a stop at the edge of a chain-link fence, half buried by years of desert drift. Behind it, a metal hatch was barely visible, a faded warning stenciled on its surface, authorized personnel only, ground zero. Fred pulled the bolt cutters from the van. This must be the off-grid facility Ray told us about. Velma studied the ground. These footprints are fresh. Someone's been here recently. Shaggy gulped. Maybe we should leave it that way. Daphne and Velma pried open the hatch with a loud creak. A stale gust of air rushed up from the darkness below, tinged with ozone and decay. Scooby sniffed and whimpered. It smells like robot ghosts and old socks, Shaggy mumbled. They descended a rusted stairwell, the flashlight beams catching strange murals etched into the concrete walls. Spirals, concentric circles, crude diagrams of sound waves intersecting tectonic fault lines. At the bottom was a sealed steel door marked Resonance Core. Velma found a biometric panel beside it, long dead. She popped open the circuit box and spliced into the backup battery with wires from her wrist communicator. Sparks flew. The door hissed and groaned, then slid open. Inside was a cavernous lab. Broken equipment lay scattered. Screens displayed garbled data. In the center, beneath a glass dome, was what looked like a chair, but not for a human. It was curved, almost organic, lined with sensors and cables that trailed into the walls like roots. Daphne whispered, "This looks like something out of a sci-fi horror movie." Velma stepped forward and activated the mainframe with a USB uplink. The monitors flickered to life. Project Marco, Stage 4 completed. Vital signs detected, 97% synchronization. Subject location, Chamber B6. Fred turned. We need to find chamber B6. As they moved deeper into the facility, Scooby suddenly stopped, ears erect. A deep voice echoed faintly through the vents. "Velma, help me." She froze. That was Marco. Shaggy gasped. "Wait, he's, like, alive." The corridor twisted through narrow passageways until they found a locked bulkhead labeled B6. Fred used a manual crank to open it. The door slid with a deafening shriek, revealing a narrow room lined with vibration amplifiers. And in the center, a man sat hunched over, wires protruding from his spine and skull, his face pale and eyes glassy. Velma whispered, "Marco Trevi." He didn't respond. He just stared, blinking slowly as if underwater. But the room trembled faintly with each breath he took. Fred stepped forward. "Marco, can you hear us?" Marco blinked, then spoke, not with his mouth, but through the vibration panels on the walls. "I am the conduit." Velma looked around. "He's linked to the entire turbine grid. He's become the transmitter." Marco's voice continued, now emerging from the intercom speakers above. "They speak through me. The desert. The sound. The pattern." Scooby whimpered. "Raggy, I want to go home." Shaggy clutched Scooby's collar. "Me too, old buddy, me too." Velma stepped closer. "Marco, listen to me. You're not just a transmitter. You're human. Ray told us everything. We can shut the system down, break the sync, bring you back." For a moment, his eyes fluttered, recognition flickering. "Ray," she tried, "but the core, it won't release me." Suddenly, lights in the room surged. The floor shook violently. On the central console, the words blinked in red. "Incoming pulse, full system integration imminent." Daphne ran to the panel. "We have 3 minutes until full synchronization." Velma turned to Fred. "If the system integrates completely, Marco's consciousness might be overwritten. Whatever they are, we'll take full control." Fred looked at the cables linking Marco to the chamber. "Then we pull the plug." Velma shook her head. "If we do that without isolating the feedback loop, it could kill him." Shaggy backed against the wall. "Let me guess, someone has to go into the creepy signal chamber and manually reverse the resonance." Velma pulled out a signal tuner from her pack. "Yes. And it needs someone who understands the waveform structures." She turned to Scooby. His tail drooped. "Ruro." Velma kneeled. "Scooby, you've been hearing the voice. The signal recognizes you. You might be the only one who can interface safely." Shaggy stepped forward. "Then I'm going with him." Fred nodded. "We'll hold down the chamber. Do what you have to." Scooby and Shaggy entered the smaller resonance booth adjacent to Marco's chamber. Velma calibrated the tuner, connecting it to the core line. The walls glowed with strange green light. Inside, a harmony of tones filled the air, not noise, but almost, singing. The system voice echoed. "Synchronization. 94%. 95%. Scooby placed his paw on the center plate. Shaggy gripped the side rails. They both shook as the resonance enveloped them. "Focus, Scooby." Velma called out from outside. "Match the signal." Scooby closed his eyes. The harmonic tones swelled. In his mind, he saw images, wind, stone, pulses of light. Then, Marco's face. "Tell Ray. I remember." Suddenly, the resonance snapped. The chamber's lights burst. The console flickered and then, silence. Then a new message appeared on the screen. "Synchronization interrupted, subject disengaged." Marco collapsed, free from the cables. His breathing was shallow, but he was alive. Velma ran to him. We got you. We stopped it. He looked up, whispering one final thing. But something stayed behind. The desert was no longer silent. Turbines across the Ventogyro wind farm roared to life in unison, their blades slicing the air with mechanical precision. A low-frequency hum rumbled beneath the sand, rising with each passing minute. Above, the clouds twisted unnaturally, as if pulled by unseen hands. Lightning crackled inside the forming vortex. The storm was alive, and it was listening. Fred slammed the door of the underground bunker behind him. The turbines weren't supposed to start again. We cut the connection. Velma stared at the data streaming across her tablet. Something else activated the resonance. A deeper system, one that didn't need Marco anymore. Daphne scanned the horizon. Then what did it need? Scooby whimpered, climbing into the mystery machine and hiding behind a box of sand-covered cereal bars. Shaggy joined him, his voice trembling. I knew this place had bad energy. Like, poltergeist pyramid Wi-Fi kind of energy. A siren blared from one of the maintenance towers as automated emergency lights blinked red. Then, through the static of the van's radio, a new signal came through, not a voice, but a rhythmic pulse, like a breath being drawn. Velma tuned in, heart racing. This isn't human. It's a repeating pattern embedded in the storm's wind currents. The turbines are amplifying it. Marco, still weak but conscious, leaned on the side of the van. It's what the desert became, when the experiment reached resonance. The signal was always here. We just gave it a voice. Fred's jaw tightened. Then we take that voice away. The group split up. Fred and Daphne headed toward the turbine control tower. Velma and Marco stayed in the van to isolate the remaining nodes. Shaggy and Scooby were sent on what seemed like the safest task, shut down the backup generator under the old cafe compound, a place now partially buried under moving dunes. Naturally, it turned out to be anything but safe. The sand churned violently as Shaggy and Scooby approached the compound. A column of dust rose behind them, coiling like a serpent. The building's glass windows shattered as a pressure wave passed through. Inside, the control panel crackled, then emitted a deep, inhuman tone. Scooby covered his ears. Make it stop. Shaggy yanked open the generator panel. It's, like, pulsing in sync with the storm. We gotta overload it. He looked to Scooby. On 3, buddy. 1, 2. 2. They pulled the main lever just as the sandstorm slammed into the building. A shockwave burst outward. For a moment, the turbines paused. Back at the tower, Fred and Daphne reached the central override. The wind pushed against them like a wall. Daphne held onto a rail while Fred input the shutdown sequence manually. Just hold on, Daphne. 10 more seconds. She squinted against the wind. This better work or we're about to get turned into windmill confetti. At the van, Velma watched the waveform spike, then collapse. System override complete. Resonance grid disabled. Turbine control, offline. Silence. Not the silence of peace, but of absence. The turbines stopped. The storm dissolved like smoke in the sky. And beneath it, the desert sighed. A deep groan echoed underground. Marco stood, trembling. It's retreating. Velma turned. Or going back to where it came from. Hours later, the team gathered at the edge of the now still park. The sky was clear. Birds returned to the wires. A single turbine turned lazily in the breeze, the only one not connected to the grid. Fred looked to Marco. What happens now? Marco removed the last neural port from his neck. We dismantle everything. Shut it down permanently. We never should have tried to speak to the Earth in its own language. Daphne nodded. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Just respected. Velma added, we still don't know what the signal was. It could have been ancient. Or alien. Or something we created by mistake. Shaggy looked around. All I know is I'm never setting foot near a wind turbine again. Scooby barked. Me neither. Runless, it has snacks. As the gang prepared to leave, Velma paused, turning her gaze to the horizon. In the far distance, beyond the final row of towers, a shape flickered, not quite solid, not quite shadow. A swirl of sand, just tall enough to resemble a man, or something older. Then it was gone. She didn't say anything. She just climbed into the mystery machine.